Great. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the information session about the Core Writer program at Playwright Center. I'm really glad you're all here. My name is Julia Brown. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Artistic Programs Manager here at Playwright Center. And I am joined by
Hi, I'm Pirronne Yousefzadeh. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Associate Artistic Director and Director of Artistic Partnerships.
Fabulous. And the two of us, together with our producing artistic director, Nicole A. Watson, run this Core Writer program, which is why we are speaking to you today. A little bit of structure of what we're going to be doing is I'm going to share my screen so that you can see where to find this information. Perone will talk a little bit about the program, the purpose of it, the benefits of it, and then we'll go through eligibility and I'll take you through step by step of the application. For those of you who are here in real time, please feel free to ask questions. You can drop them in the chat. You can unmute yourself or pop on video. You can raise your hand. Any format is fine. I'll try and stop and address questions as they come up. I'll also save some time more of an open Q&A. But please, this is a place to bring your questions. So I hope you will ask any that you have. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. All right. Can you see that, Perone?
Can.
Perfect. So this is the program page on the Playwright Center website. You can see up here we're at pwcenter.org, and then we just clicked on this programs button at the top of the screen. This shows information about all of our different programs. If you're eligible for one, you may be eligible for others as well. Most of our application deadlines have passed for the year, but if you are a Minnesota resident and interested in the Core Writer program, you may also be interested in the McKnight Fellowship in Playwriting, and that has a deadline of January 8th. So if you're a Minnesota writer, take a look at that one, see if you might be eligible for that as well. But for right now, we are going to click on Core Writer Program. And Perone, do you want to tell us a little bit about what this program is and the purpose of it?
Sure, I'd love to. The Core Writer program is a 3-year appointment, and it is designed to offer support to writers who have demonstrated a body of work, commitment to their craft, and artistic vision. The program is available to committed professional playwrights. It does not require residence here in Minnesota or relocation for the program. So we support writers across the country. There are core writers based here in Minnesota. We also have writers in Los Angeles, Seattle, New York, Austin, you name it. Writers who are part of the Core Writer program are guaranteed a workshop in each of the 3 years during their core writer term. And that workshop can be what is known as a general core writer workshop, which is an internal workshop, usually around 15 hours, spread over 3 days, sometimes 4 days if there's the desire to have a writing day in the middle of that process. And those are for, any project in development for that writer. They can be at any stage of development, whether it's a first draft or a fifth draft. And we also invite our core writers to apply for our public season, which includes the Ruth Easton series, In the Lab, and Play Labs. And these public readings have more sort of expanded processes ranging from about 25 hours to about 35 or 38 hours of developmental time. And they have either one or two sharings for an audience. They're advertised to our members are sort of, we don't have subscribers. All of our events are free, but to our sort of mailing list. And if a curator's play is part of the Ruth Easton series or the Play Labs Festival, those plays are also filmed, edited, and then made available via streaming for 1 week, a few weeks after the public readings conclude. Core writers also have the opportunity to apply for a very new series we've just created this year called Fridays at Four, which is sort of a little bit of a kind of hybrid of a general core writer workshop and a public season offering in the sense that it is not quite as long of a process as, say, a Ruth Easton or Play Labs. It's about 20 hours of rehearsal, so more than a general core workshop. And the culminating public event does not necessarily need to be a full reading of the play. It can be a sharing of part of the play, the first act, or, the first 30 pages, whatever may be sort of appropriate to where that play is in its developmental journey. And we pair that sharing of the work with some kind of conversation or activity or class that sort of orbits around some of the central themes or ideas of the play. So we're bringing in to sort of enhance and round out the whole experience. Experts in and folks committed to various different fields. This year, for instance, one of the plays that will be part of this series involves quilting, and so we're looking at offering a quilting class that also sort of uh, it happens like sort of in tandem with that particular workshop. Um, so those are all of the different ways. General Core Writer Workshop, Fridays at 4, or Ruth Easton, Play Labs, or In the Lab are all of the different ways that core writers can have their work developed over the course of those 3 years. And it is also possible to apply to have a second or additional core writer terms. And finally, once a core writer term has concluded, that does not mean that one's relationship to the Playwright Center has come to an end. Rather, all core writers at the end of their term become affiliated writers, which means like you can't get rid of us, basically. We're part of your artistic life now. And you're also able to still apply for public season opportunities. It is possible to pursue artistic partnership opportunities, and you receive our newsletter and are just sort of part of the community of writers who we are always thinking of and advocating for when we get interest from a theater for particular plays for their season planning or teaching opportunities or any of the like. Julia, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's great. It's if you are aware of some of our other fellowship programs, those have perhaps an annual stipend involved. The Core Writer program doesn't have an annual stipend, but you are paid for your time in workshop, and how much that is will depend on how long the workshop is. So there's still compensation. It is just it happens when you have your workshop each year. Most of them happen in person here in St. Paul at the Playwright Center. So we cover your travel and your housing, and working with primarily Twin Cities artists. When needed, sometimes for different reasons, accessibility reasons, we can also do workshops on Zoom. So it's very much every year we talk to you about what your goals are for the year, what piece you really want to focus on, but we are available for dramaturgical support, career support, and your overall career. So while we may workshop only one of your plays each year, that's certainly not the only play that we can talk about or help support you with for that 3-year term. Talking a little bit about eligibility here. Core Writer is our most open eligibility, which also means it's our most competitive program. So this tends to be our largest application pool because most writers in the country can apply. You must be over the age of 18. You must currently reside in the United States and have legal right to work in the United States. That doesn't mean you need to be a citizen. It just means that while you're here for workshop, we need to pay you, and we need to be able to do that in a way that the IRS will not come after us and shut us down. So whatever paperwork that means that allows you to receive that payment is totally great with us. We have a note here saying it is highly competitive, designed for committed professional playwrights. The application requires that you have a full-length play script to submit. So if you are a writer who has not written a full-length play, I would say this isn't quite the program for you yet. And because it is very competitive, we, recommend that you're a writer who has a little bit of work under your belt, a body of work, and can take advantage of a very self-directed program. This is not a program where you that has a ton of hand holding. You move here and we, check in with you on a weekly basis as a as some other programs are that we run. This is very much us asking you, hey, you're a professional. What do you need? What is it that would be helpful for your career at this point? So in order to take advantage of those resources, we are particularly looking for writers who have the experience and the capacity to have an understanding of their own career, their own work, and their development, and be able to let us know what would be helpful without us kind of putting a design on your workshop or say you have to check these specific boxes. I have a great question here about what constitutes a body of work. It's really anything. You will submit a resume with your application. That will be something that the evaluators look at. So that can be work in a bunch of different forms. That can be a bunch of work in one form. There's not a requirement for you have to check X boxes. You have to have a certain number of a certain type of work. What we mean by a body of work is you have the capacity and the experience to really create your core writer experience, if that makes sense. So you know enough about yourself and your work, and you've created enough work to know how to take advantage of these resources. But unlike some other programs, there is not a requirement that you've had a certain number of professional productions, either a minimum or a maximum. If you are a student enrolled in a full-time program, you are not eligible, but you will be eligible when your full-time program has ended. If you're in a low residency program or ABD where you're not in coursework or something like that, then you can apply. Playwright Center staff who are directly involved in this program are not eligible to apply. The core writer term is 3 years, starting July 1st of 2026. It will wrap up on June 30th of 2029, which is an insane number to say out of my mouth right now. 2029 is almost upon us. And one important note is that at least one slot is reserved each year for a Minnesota writer. So we don't necessarily know every year how many new core writers will be taking. That's dependent on a lot of different factors. We have other programs that that are to see if I come back. Pirronne, did I disappear for a sec?
Yeah,
Awesome.
you sort of cut off a little bit right at you. We have other programs that, and then it paused.
Great. So we have other programs that are specifically funded by certain foundations where we say there is always this number of fellows in that particular program. Because the Core Writer program has a lot of different funding sources, we choose our number of new writers dependent on the budget, dependent on our schedule, our capacity for the coming year. And because it's always a rolling kind of admission, every year a certain number of core writers finish their 3 years and a certain number join on. So that will also influence how many new writers we can take each year. It's usually between 3 and 8. It's been very different over the past few years, depending on all these factors, but at least one of those writers is a Minnesota-based writer. And we do that because we are in Minnesota. We are very invested in the arts ecosystem of this place and want to continue supporting local writers and making it possible for Minnesota-based writers to continue to make work at a professional level. So that is one important thing to note. But beyond that one slot, there's no residency requirement for any of the other core writers who are being accepted. You can see more on this page about previous recipients, some quotes from a previous person, and then we also have a breakdown of the application. I'm going to skip past that really quickly because I'm about to take you through the application step by step. A couple of notes here that might be helpful. The video of this info session that we're doing right now will replace this current video in just a few days. So if you need to refer back to this conversation, you can do that here. I would also draw your attention to this little link. It's just a little sentence, but I think it's a very helpful one. We put together this fall a document of advice from recent core writers and fellows, folks who have applied successfully. And it's all about the application process, what helped them, what they found useful, advice, tips from the really, kind of philosophical to the really practical. I highly recommend that you check this out. These are folks who really can tell you how to create a successful application in this current moment. They're all folks who were accepted within the past few years. So I want to highlight that for you. We're also offering a free working session on January 12th that's focused all on creating artist statements. This is something that it'll be a combination of some advice and a facilitator giving some information, but also writing prompts and some discussion and Q&A. And the writer who is going to be leading that session is actually a current core writer, Saimukta Vangsai. And if you know Saimukta, there is nobody better at writing grants, writing applications, writing artist statements. She is truly the master of her craft at applications. So I highly recommend, if you're interested in developing your artist statement, writing one for the first time, refreshing one that you already have, join us for this free session. And then the last thing I'll note is that if you are in person here in Minnesota in the Twin Cities, I will be doing some in-person office hours after our session today and on January 14th. If you're in the neighborhood and want to swing by and talk about your application, I'm happy to do that as well. The deadline is January 22nd. That is a hard deadline, and it's important to note that letters of recommendation are due at the same time as the rest of the application. We'll talk more about that in a moment. I want to show you one thing about this webpage that has confused some people in the past. When you first click on this page and you're at the very top, you'll notice that there isn't a little pop-up on the bottom with an application button. But if you scroll down a little bit, boom, there it is. So this is where the application button shows up. So if you first click on this page and you think, oh my gosh, there's no button, I don't know how to access the application, just scroll down and it will pop up for you. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to click the apply button, and it is going to take us to our application platform. Important thing to note about this, even though it has a Playwright Center logo here, we are no longer on the Playwright Center website. We have gone into the ether to a platform called SlideRoom. You can find that in the URL. SlideRoom is the name of this application platform. I want to highlight that for you because some of you are members of Playwright Center, and so you're used to going to the website, logging in to access your profile or the opportunities database or things like that. Your login for the Playwright Center membership site will not automatically work here. It is a completely different site. You can certainly set up the same password if you would like to, but SlideRoom does not know your information from the membership site. So if you have never accessed SlideRoom before, you'll click this sign up button. It'll take you through setting up your account, your password, all of your information. I currently have an account with SlideRoom, so I'm going to enter my information right here. And I'll log in, and this takes me to a page that tells me about all of my applications. So it has the applications that I have in process. It also has completed applications, things that I've submitted in the past. So that can be useful if you're thinking, what play did I submit last year? Who did I ask for a letter for? All of those types of things you can access here. But I'm going to click on the directory button because that will take me to all of the Playwright Center programs that are available. And I'm going to click here on the Core Writer program. Another reminder of the deadline here. And this takes us back to this page. This is all a breakdown of what Pirronne already talked about, so we'll skip that and we'll click the blue Begin Application button. In Slide Room, if something is blue, that generally means you can click on it, and if it's underlined, that means you can click on it. So that's kind of the basic navigation of this platform. And it's going to be thinking, because I think my internet is a little bit slow if my slight freezing is any indication. So first it takes us to the first of two forms. You'll see this navigation bar at the top that tells you the 4 steps of this application. So the first thing we need to do is fill out a couple of forms. We're going to ask for your phone number, your current phone number. We're going to ask for your current mailing address. This helps us make sure that your address is in the US. If you have an international address that you're using, you'll get an email from me asking, hey, are you a current resident of the US? What is the story with your address? This is also how we'll determine who is a Minnesota-based writer. So if you are currently living in Minnesota and you are working in Minnesota, but for some reason your mail goes elsewhere, add a note here about your residential address and how long you have been a resident and kind of give context for that. Because if I see a different state, I will think, great, this is an application from that state, which means they're absolutely eligible to apply, but I won't note them as a Minnesota resident for that specific Minnesota slot. Hopefully that makes sense. And next, it's asking for pronouns, which is totally optional, but just know that throughout this process, the staff and the evaluators will be talking about you and about your work. So pronouns help us do that in an accurate way. It'll ask for the title of the play that you're submitting as your writing sample. And then we're asking, how did you hear about the program? That really helps us understand sort of how our different outreach initiatives work, who we're reaching, how we're reaching them, and what we might want to do more of. There's an eligibility question, which again, it's pretty basic eligibility, but read through that reminder and make sure that all of these things apply to you, and then click, yes, I am eligible to apply. If for some reason you click no, Slide Room will not kick you out of this application. It will let you go through and submit a full application, even if you say, no, I'm not eligible. It's not quite smart enough of a system to recognize that you've said, no, I'm not eligible. However, if that comes through, I will reach out to you and say, hey, you say you're ineligible. Can you explain, this context? If it turns out you're not eligible for this program, regardless of if you filled out a full application or not, we won't be able to consider you for the program. So if you aren't eligible, I would say don't go through all of the work of submitting and putting together an application because it will not move on in the process. However, if it's an accident, oh no, I actually accidentally clicked the wrong button, I will help you fix that so that we know that you are eligible for the program. Next, I'll certify this is all my information. I've created it. It is true. And then you'll see at the bottom, there's a button to save changes. It also auto saves every few seconds. So you can always check and make sure it says changes saved. There's 2 ways to move on. One is this continue button or this next button. They both take you to the same place, which is our second form. The second form is a demographic form. A couple important things to note about the demographic information form. First is that this form that we're looking at right now is only visible to Playwright Center staff, myself, Pirronne, and Nicole. It is not visible to the evaluators or the selection panelists at all. They will not even see that there is a demographic form. It doesn't even pop up as like a hidden link or a broken link or anything. So the important thing about that is these answers that you give to any of these questions have no impact on the selection process because they're not seen by the people who make the decisions. It also means that if there's information that you're providing in this form that you feel is important for context for your work, that you want the evaluators to know about you, you'll need to find another place to put that in your application, like the artist statement, the goals statement, something like that, because they will not have access to that information if it's just on this form. Awesome. Thank you, Gemma, for coming. It's great. It was great to see you, and we'll have the video available after. So there's a little statement here about why we gather this information. It helps us track data over time. That's the other thing to note about demographic information. These aren't supposed to be questions that tell us every single thing there is to know about you in all of your nuance and complexity as an individual human being. It's a way to track trends over the course of multiple years, and the data, when we use it, is anonymized. So that's kind of what drives how these questions are set up and why we ask them. We also ask the same questions of our evaluators and our selection panelists. It helps us kind of track who is involved on all sides of the process as we're trying to create a more equitable and accessible process on all sides. You can read more kind of about how we've designed this. There's also a contact if you have some questions about what we do with this data. Christopher Bynum, who's our Director of Advancement, is a great person to connect with about that, because some of these questions are also driven by questions we are required to provide to funders, foundations, things like that. Again, it's all provided in an anonymized fashion. So I'm going to click that I've read this explanation. The first question is about racial groups that you are affiliated with. You'll see if there's a square, that means it's a checkbox, and you can check as many as many as you think are relevant. There's also always a decline to answer button. There is absolutely no issue with clicking decline on any of these questions. You can feel free to do that. There's also a write in button. So if you click on that, a little box will open up so that you can write more information if there's something you want to add that's not reflected in the check boxes. I'm answering just for myself. There's also a question if you'd like to expand on this question in any way that you would like. The next question is about gender terms that may or may not apply to you. So you'll click the ones that do, as many answers as you would like, or decline, or write something in. The next question is about sexual orientation. Same thing, click as many of the answers as you would like. The next question is about if you identify as neurodivergent or as someone with a disability or disabilities. There's some definitions here in case that's some unfamiliar language, but there are different types of boxes that you can choose because we know that neurodivergence and disability for some people are the same experience. For some people, they're different experiences. It's sort of how you personally identify in the language that you use. So I am going to click the ones that apply to me. I could also write something in or decline. This question is a chance to expand on that answer if you would like. The reason we offered this space is, again, because it's a very sort of nuanced question that can mean different things to different people. It's also a space that we can learn about how to make our processes more accessible and equitable. So if we're seeing some trends in particular resources that would be helpful for our applicants, that helps us know perhaps where to put our attention and our capacity as we're trying to create a process that works better for all of our applicants. The next question is about English language proficiency, and this focuses on languages that you use in your day-to-day life. So whether you primarily don't speak English and you don't speak English fluently, if you only speak English, if you use primary languages, you can click whichever applies to you. I will note that this isn't asking what are all the languages that you have ever encountered. So if you took a semester of German in college, That's super great. It's not really the trend that we're tracking here. We're tracking sort of the primary languages that people use. And if knowing things like that helps us know if we need to be putting resources towards providing resources in other languages, if that makes sense, as they are the primary language that people use. So you can feel free to let us know what other languages we use, and then we'll have trends over time telling us, oh, there's actually a large percentage of people who use this language. And perhaps if the resources are available that we can provide multilingual support, then that's how we'll kind of be able to find that information. Then we ask about age, which is pretty self-explanatory. You can also feel free to decline. Education level, again, this is sort of the most education that you have gone through in your life. And again, you can decline or write in if nothing that's listed here makes sense for you. And the last question is about household income, your estimated household income before taxes. So you can pick the range that makes sense to you. There's also an unsure button if you just don't know, which is totally fine. The last question is if you have any feedback for us about this survey. This is a survey that we look at every single year, that we edit our phrasing, our options, things like that. So we learn a lot of that and get a lot of that information from folks who fill it out. So if you have any thoughts or suggestions or want to share your experience of filling it out, you can do so here, but totally, totally optional. So now we're going to continue to the next step, and you'll see there's a happy green check mark that says we're done with the forms. No more forms. We're on to step 2. Step 2 is the attachments, which are really the main part of the application. This is the part that's being evaluated. You'll see this note here about how evaluators are going to be approaching your application. So the artistic statement and the goals, kind of the parts around your script, are being weighted 40%, and your script itself is weighted 60%. So the evaluators will be doing a combination of numerical scoring on different criteria and written comments, and those things together will determine who is moving on to the finalist round. There's also a note here that the primary language that is used both by the staff and the evaluators in this process is English. That doesn't mean that none of the evaluators or the staff speak any other languages. It just means that we cannot guarantee that someone who reads your work has facility in languages other than English. So we want to provide that information in case that affects how you present some of your work. It doesn't mean you can't present work that has other languages in it. You absolutely can. Just know that you won't necessarily know whether or not the evaluator reads that language. So if you want to provide a translation or some context, that's totally fine. Or if you want to leave it untranslated on purpose, that's also totally fine. Sometimes people like to add a line of context that they've chosen to do that. So totally up to you, but just so you know, that's all we can only guarantee that evaluators can read English. The first document that you're going to be attaching is a playwriting resume. We are asking for a maximum of 3 pages. If you submit a longer one, you will get an email from me saying, hey, I need you to submit a shorter resume. Might as well cut out the back and forth and just upload a 3-page maximum from the start. It can be any format that is legible. We don't care what you add. I mean, we care because we care about you, but we don't have rules about what you include, what you don't include, how you list it, anything like that. Whatever you feel like is useful to give context for your career and your work is what we would want to see. So I'm going to click choose a file. It's going to open up a window for my computer, and I'll be able to choose my resume. We are asking for only PDFs. The reason we do that is SlideRoom will actually let you upload a different document type, but then no one can open it and read it on the other side. So I wish it just didn't let you upload different formats, but this is the way that the program works. So if you upload something in a different format, you'll get an email from me saying, hey, I can't open this. Can you please submit a PDF? If you need help creating a PDF, just let me know. Now I can tell that my resume has uploaded successfully because I get this little preview of the first page. If I realize, oh, this isn't the document I meant, I have an updated one, I can click this little trash can and it will take that file away and let me upload a new one. Pirronne, do you have any advice about kind of what to include in a resume, especially knowing that we're limited to 3 pages? What do you think would be the most useful thing for this program?
Yeah, I think because this is a program, oh no, I think my computer's freezing. Oh dear.
I can hear you.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I'll just talk with my frozen face. Because this is a program where we're looking for, sort of a demonstrated body of work, I would say, that in the resume, it would be really great to include, all of your plays, certainly. And if you have other sort of creative writing projects, I would include those as well. If you're struggling to fit everything in 3 pages, then I would prioritize your theatrical writing. Um, uh, and any sort of like developmental opportunities those have had, any workshops, any world premieres, any awards it was nominated for or a finalist for, or awards that it received, all of those kinds of things, I think are great to include, as well as certainly, your education in playwriting, whether that's through a BFA or MFA program, or if you've taken classes with wonderful core writer Amy Berryman, or any number of other writers who offer classes privately. Um, and, I think beyond that, um, you can certainly also include like other sort of related theatrical experience, whether that's teaching or anything else, directing. But again, because there is that sort of limit of 3 pages, if you're running out of space, like certainly I would say front load the things that really give us a sense of like your arc as a writer specifically, and what that body of work is.
Awesome. Thank you. It helps to think about your whole application as one story. So, as you're going through and writing your artist statement, your goal statement, you're selecting your script, the resume is part of that. And sort of how are you framing yourself, presenting yourself and your work for someone who is unfamiliar. The next thing that we're going to ask for is a 1 page artistic statement. That is a maximum, that's a hard maximum of 1 page. So this is a chance for you to provide context for why you create theater. Why is theater your medium? What kind of space do you feel that you're in the field, whether that's aesthetically, the types of stories you tell, identity markers that influence your writing. It also provides context for the play that you're submitting as your writing sample, so it can be helpful to talk about that play, why you chose it, what you want the evaluator to focus on while reading that play. How does it fit into your larger body of work? Where are you going next? This is really a great place to get an evaluator excited about your work and think, wow, this person really has a sense of where they're going. They have a drive, they have some inspiration, and I want to support that going forward. I will say this is different from your resume. So, 1 page is not a lot of space. I talk a lot about the real estate of the artistic statement, and sometimes folks use half of that space to reiterate what they already shared in their resume. I am a writer who has done this. I wrote this play, which was like this. It was at this theater. What that really does is cut down on the space that you can use to get into the meat of who you are as a writer. I'll also say that all of the evaluators and the selection panelists are professional theater artists. They are other playwrights, they're dramaturgs, directors, artistic directors, literary managers, educators. These are folks who spend their time and their all their days thinking about theater, thinking about new work. You don't need to convince them that theater is important or that stories are important. They agree with you already. They also spend their lives doing that same work. If you're applying for something else where the people reading it maybe don't have a theatrical background, maybe you do need to sort of make the argument and introduce them to the idea of playwriting. That's not the case for this application. So I recommend digging in as soon as possible to not just, I think stories are important. Why are your stories important? Why is the way you decide to tell your stories important, unique, interesting? Theater, I think, is a great art form. Awesome, they agree. What about the way you make theater? So, as specific and as personal as you can get is going to be the most effective. Again, we have a working session coming up in early January that can help you work on this with Saimukta. And then that also gives you a decent amount of time before this deadline to be writing and editing. Please reread your statement, edit your statement, get some other folks to look at your statement. Patrick Scully, who is also a fantastic applier of things, has some advice for writing an artist statement that you should try to have it read by two different people, a person who maybe is a close friend or family member but isn't in your field, and then a person who might know your work professionally but isn't your closest friend, and see what they recognize of you in that statement and what they've learned that's new in that statement. And hopefully there'll be some, overlap and some kind of new information for those people in your artist statement. There's a lot I can say about artist statements, but I'd love to toss it to you, Pirronne, about other kind of tips or tricks or things to keep in mind when you're writing something like this.
Yeah, I think, no, I think you've hit upon a lot of the major points, and I really just want to underscore that, the resume is the summary of the experience, and also the artistic statement is the place where the reader can get a sense of you, in tandem with your play. And that, we're there's sort of like a hard skills, soft skills kind of like division. I mean, not to get like corporate about it, but that that the sort of passion and voice of your artistry is what can really come through in that statement in ways that are really different from the resume. And also to allow yourself to embrace the fact that you are writing to theater practitioners. So you can it can be inside baseball. Like you're not right. This isn't a grant where, or an opportunity where the people adjudicating are also reading applicants from, who are visual artists or sculptors or, like these are theater people reading applications from theater people. So let yourself be, you can get inside baseball. You can reference inspirations. You can, you don't have to over explain like who Ariane Mnouchkine is if that's somebody who has really inspired your artistry. But it is, I think, important to dig in specifically to your why, your purpose, your artistic vision, and as Julia said, go beyond sort of the blanket statements of like theater being important or, speaking to the human condition. Like go further, use that one page in lieu of re-summarizing your resume, use that one page to like dig deep in those regards. And then I think also like thinking about how, as Julia said, like we're sort of taking all of these things together, how does this enhance or round out or further contextualize the play that you submit? Like how are those things in conversation with each other without being redundant? Um, so that like the whole of your application tells the story. Yeah. I also find it helps me sometimes to like brainstorm out loud with a friend before I write an artistic statement. So just naming that as like another tool potentially, because I think sometimes the blank page and the sitting down at the computer can feel intimidating and also feel a little bit academic and make and put me kind of back in like in an English lit like flashback. And these are not those kinds of essays. Like so, and there you are allowed to be, I think, more I wouldn't say like informal, but more personal and more sort of idiosyncratic in your voice and in how you use the language. So if you are a person who, like me, gets your best ideas by like taking a walk, talking to a friend, getting in the shower, like, any number of things that can sort of help shake loose, some of that stuckness. I recommend that as well.
There's a great piece of advice in that advice document that I pointed to earlier from our current McKnight Fellow, Marge Buckley. And it's just, Marge is just a beautiful writer and advice giver, but she talks about writing applications and artistic statements and treating it like writing your plays. Whatever your process is for sitting down and getting playwriting done, whether that's, I always sit in this corner, I light this candle, I turn this music on, think about writing your application pieces in the same way. It's part of your job. It's part of the work that you're doing. It's also creative. I think sometimes people think of this as like, now I do the business side, and then I do the side that I actually enjoy of writing the plays. And if you think about them sort of in more of the same space, it's, I think, probably a less miserable experience, but it also might make it easier for you to access the same voice so that the evaluator can really recognize you between the statement and the play and can tell, oh, this was written by the same person. And I now get a sense of what they're about, what their deal is, what their inspiration is. The next document is our core writer goal statement. So, one of the nice things about this application is your artist statement doesn't have to talk about why you're applying for core writer, what are you going to do as a core writer. This first artistic statement can just be contextualizing your work and contextualizing your career. This next statement is really asking, how would this program benefit your career as a playwright? Given where you are right now and who you are, as you just told us in your artist statement, why is this a program that would be helpful to you and that you are ready to take advantage of? Sometimes people like to talk about specific projects that they want to develop. Maybe you already have an idea for, my first year as a core writer, I would work on this play, or here's a couple plays I have sort of in the hopper and I would be really excited to develop them. Here's the stage they're at. Here's why developing them at the Playwright Center would be the right next step and get me to where I want to go with them. You can take a look back at that website or talk to either of us about the specific resources. Why would, support from Playwright Center staff be useful? Why would working on something in the Twin Cities be useful? Really try to be specific. One of the goals of this goals statement is for the evaluators to recognize that you know what you're applying for. You've thought about it, and you can, if they decide to give you this resource, which is highly competitive, you will be able to take advantage of it, and it will lead to sort of steps forward in your work, in your craft, and in your career. So that is kind of the what you're proving, I guess, if the argument that you're making with this statement is, I am a writer who can take these resources and run with them. I know what I would do. I understand what I'm applying for. I'm not just sending the exact same application to every opportunity that comes across my desk. I've thought about this, and you should want to support me. I'm great. Here's what I do. I'm super specific. Here's how you can support me. Get on board. That's really kind of what you want the evaluators to feel. As I attach this, Pirronne, any other ideas about the goal statement?
Yeah, I think I just want to say that, a core workshop can look like a lot of different things. It doesn't necessarily have to be you come in with a full draft and you have actors and they read it and then you do rewrites. It can be that you come in with an idea and that you do generative work with those actors, or that you want to use a couple of the days to meet with some scholars in certain fields and then spend some time with actors. We've had the whole spectrum, and we continue to with our core writers, because it is a very sort of bespoke, self-directed program in that way. So I would say, like, think about, how you would use these 3 years. And that could mean that one year it is a sort of more, like, sort of traditional new play development process with actors and a director and a dramaturg and all of those things. And then it could also mean that, like, you have another project in the hopper that's like really early on, really early days, but you want to get in the room with it. You want to start wrestling with it. Um, it doesn't have to be, that every draft is like nearly production ready by any stretch of the imagination for you to work on them here. And the other thing is, like, we don't and can't guarantee anything about the future life of your plays. What we can do is create the circumstances in which you can realize your artistic vision as fully as humanly possible. So if your goals are around, like, I want to get produced, that understood, heard, universal in that sentiment. And that's not what this program can guarantee or provide. We can facilitate the circumstances for the work to get as strong as possible. We can advocate for your work. We can send it out to theaters. We can help you brainstorm places to send it to. And then the rest is, like, up to the gods. So really just use this to talk about, like, what you want to do at Playwright Center in a rehearsal room, and how you want to use that real estate, as Julia says.
Yeah, and that's a great point about kind of the goals. You want them to be sort of as expansive as you feel like you can achieve, but also realistic and achievable. And saying, like, by the end of 3 years, I'll have X number of productions and be staffed on a Netflix show. What that tells the evaluator is, I don't think this person really understands this program. It's not that they're bad goals. It's not that I don't hope this happens for the person, but that's not the focus of this program. I will also kind of expand on what Pirronne said, that we, for workshops that you do, whether they're in the public season or not, have brought in kind of every type of collaborator you can imagine. So sometimes it's, I'm working on a musical and I just want to dig in with a composer without actors and just, rock through some music. Sometimes it's research. Sometimes, we've had a bunch of astrologers come in and give, information about their experience. We've had, a group of conscientious objectors come in and talk about what that experience was like. Sometimes it's just been actors and you want to ask them about their life experiences. And then, of course, sometimes it's working on text, it's improvisation, it's bringing a movement person is. So you can be as creative as you want to be, in terms of how you would approach your work, in ways that I would recommend align with how you've described your work. If you talked about your process in the artistic statement, it would be great if that process made sense with your goals, right? Because that gives one coherent storyline. The last thing I'll say about this goal statement is, you're not signing your life away to this goal statement. If you say, I want to work on these 3 plays over the next 3 years, then you're accepted as a core writer. And we say, hey, what do you want to work on? We're not going back to this document and saying, well, in January of 2026, you said XYZ. You'll have plenty of time to change your mind. We will ask you each year of your core writer term, what do you want to do? So again, this is a chance for you to share with the evaluators what your hopes and dreams might be, but you don't have to necessarily, like, I have a budget in mind, or I need to be, I'm going to work in March 2027. Those kinds of details are things that we work out with core writers once they're accepted. And the evaluators are not involved in that process. Once the application process is done, the evaluators are no longer a part of your sort of core writer planning. So just wanted to give, that's a question that comes up every year is, am I committing to something a year and a half or 3 years in advance by writing this goal statement? No, you are not. So as specific as you can be in terms of what your process would look like and what you imagine would be helpful. So, but don't feel stressed about us kind of, making you sign your name in blood. The last part of the application and the sort of most highly weighted part of the application is your script. This is a full-length play, which we define as something that runs at least 45 minutes in production. If you have a piece that is shorter that you consider to be a full-length play because of the specific medium you're working in, please reach out to me so that we can talk about that and figure out if that counts as a full-length play for the purposes of this application. I will say it's pretty rare that we accept a shorter piece, but it has happened when someone is working, sometimes people working in very specific theater for young audiences of a very specific age, then the sort of standards for what full length is might be different. There's certain types of object work that can sometimes affect that. But if you have a piece that seems quite short, I'll probably reach out to you and ask how long it runs in production. If you are submitting a script of a musical, you must be the book writer. And if someone else wrote the lyrics or you wrote the lyrics, you will need to specify that very clearly, just so that the evaluators know whose work they're evaluating and what to pay attention to. Opera librettos are not counted as a full-length play script for the purposes of this application. And co-written work is not accepted if it just is something that you developed with another person or with an ensemble that doesn't have a clear division of I wrote this. That won't be accepted for this because it is an individual opportunity. So we don't give core writer slots to groups of people. And in order for an evaluator to be able to say, I want to choose this specific person as a core writer, they need to be able to evaluate your specific work. Another note that if you are submitting a play with music or a play that has other resources around it, like demos, videos of productions, photographs, set design sketches, things like that, we cannot accept any of those supplementary materials. The evaluators are only looking at text. We have selected them as evaluators because of their facility with evaluating text-based work, not their facility with composition or set design or costume design or any of these other aspects of the piece. They are only focused on the text that you have written. We also know that many people who will apply with a script don't have those supplementary materials. There are plenty of people who've written the book for a musical that hasn't found a composer yet, or they don't have professional demos. So we're trying to avoid someone being selected for a program based off the work of somebody else. So that's one of the reasons that we're very specific about that. If there are links to things in your script, I will ask you to take them out. And I will also be letting the evaluators know, don't seek out other information or click links to demos or other information that exists. A little bit of advice about how to pick a script, right? You have all these plays. How do you pick a script for this program? Because it's such a large part of the evaluation, I highly recommend that this is your strongest script that presents an example of your work right now. So that balance between where are you at right now in your work? What are you chewing on? What are you working through aesthetically, formally, things like that? How, what you're talking about in your artist statement about what's important to you and how you approach the work. You want that to be present in this script, but you also want it to be a very strong piece. You are not proposing to workshop a play. There may be other opportunities where you're going to submit your newest piece, your most unfinished piece, because you're saying, this play has a lot of potential and I want to work on it at that institution. That is not what this writing sample is. You're certainly welcome to, if you're selected as a core writer, you're welcome to work on the play that you applied with. That's totally fine. But you are not proposing to specifically work on this play. This is your sample. This is you saying, I've told you about who I am as a writer, what I care about, what I focus on, the stories I tell, the approach I take to my work. I told you about what I want to do, how I want to develop my craft and my career. And here's a sample of my work that convinces you that I am at a career point and at a craft point, that I am ready for this sort of high level opportunity, and, that I am a person that you want to invest resources in, and you're excited to see what I do next. You want to read this one script and have the evaluator go, I need to see the next play that this person writes. I want to see this performed. I want to read everything they've ever written. Oh my gosh, Playwright Center, you need to make this person a core writer. I would also say, as Pirronne mentioned before, your script and your statements being in conversation with each other is really important for an application like this. If you spend your statement saying, I really focus on telling the stories of women who are erased from history, and then you choose your script that's kind of sort of sitcom, rom-com that's in the present day, and has totally fictional characters and doesn't isn't based on any sort of historical work. It might be a great play and a great statement, but if it leaves the evaluator with a lot of questions about, okay, does this writer really understand what they're about? Do they have a mission? Because they've said this and then they've done this, and they have not bridged these two things for me. I often say that, like, the thing you don't want your evaluator to be is confused. Whatever it is you want them to walk away with, you want it to be coherent. And whether they love it or hate it, you want them to know what it is that you're presenting. And so if they walk away with a, huh, that tends to not lead to a super successful application. So, Pirronne, I'd love your thoughts on selecting a script.
I really think you nailed it. Like, yeah, it wants to, again, like, sort of complete the story, bring it home, as far as like who you are as an artist. Um, yeah, it wants to be something that feels finished, that feels complete. Um, and that, yeah, demonstrates like what you're passionate about, what you're interested in now. So that, as Julia said, it doesn't leave your evaluator confused or sort of like sort of wrestling with what feels like a contradiction within your application. Yeah. And
Awesome.
also, it's sometimes helpful if you're not sure, you're too close to it. Like, ask a friend, ask a mentor, like, which do you think should be my writing sample? It's always, I always find that like my applications for various things are always strongest when I when I use when I include the community of people who are smarter than me that help me figure it out, and also have a perspective on my work from outside of me that is quite helpful. So anyway, just offering that up too.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I know we're kind of over an hour, but I hope you'll hang out or visit this recording later if you need to duck out. Try to give as much context as we can. The last question that I often get about scripts is, how old can my script be? And I would say the answer to that question is really about your process. There are some people who write 5 new drafts a year. There are people who it takes 3 years to get a first draft done. All of that is fine. I would just say, if you're going to choose an older play, like over 5 years old, and that is clear from the script document, you might want to give a little bit of context in your statement about where you are now, what you've done since, maybe development that you've done on this specific piece. Sometimes folks might submit a play that's 10 years old because you were caregiving for the last 8 years or something like that, and you haven't been able to write a new play or develop this piece any further. That certainly doesn't make you ineligible for this program, but you might want to give the context in your statement saying, here's what I've been up to, since I wrote this play, and here's where I'm going to go next. Again, if you don't provide that context, then it's just a question mark for the writer about, oh, this play is dated 2003. I wonder why they chose that. And then I wonder, is this their last play that they wrote? Are they an active playwright right now? What has happened in the last 22 years? Just so context is your friend, I will say. So I'm going to click choose a file so I can attach my lovely script sample. Now you'll see this processing icon come up. Just make sure you don't X out of the page or go back while it's processing, because then you might lose it. So wait until you can tell it is uploaded by seeing the little thumbnail and your little name of the file there before you move on. But now we've put all of the important parts of the application or our parts of the application in. So we'll click next. You see the attachments are complete. And this takes us to references. SlideRoom uses the word reference. We use the word letter of recommendation. Words, I guess. Letter of recommendation. So we are asking for one letter from an individual who's familiar with your work as a playwright. It cannot be written by current Playwright Center staff or board members. If you have a question about if someone is current staff or board, reach out to me. I can easily let you know. We'll talk a little bit about selecting a recommender in a minute, but I'm just going to show you how this works. Letters are due at the same time as the application I need to edit this. It's January 22nd at 11:59. But, if they come in a day late, I can work with that. But they are due at the same time. So I highly recommend, even if you haven't picked your script yet, you haven't written your artist statement yet, that you log in to SlideRoom, start this application, and go to the references page and request your letter of recommendation as soon as possible. I would certainly have a conversation with the person first and say, like, hey, Pirronne, are you comfortable if I put you down for a letter of recommendation? Here's the program, blah, blah, blah. So that Pirronne knows to look out for this invitation. But I would do that sooner rather than later so that you don't end up with somebody who has no time to write a good letter or who just isn't able to do it at all by the deadline. So what you will do is you'll click this add reference button, and it's going to take you to a pop-up where it's asking for some specific information. The only things that are required are the name and the email address. So I'm going to ask my friend Elena to write my reference. I can say, where she works, what our relationship is. I can add a personal message, which can be nice. So I can say, hi, this is the letter we talked about. This checkbox basically says that Elena can just fill out the letter and submit it without going through me. If I unclick this, it means there's an extra step before it's submitted. So I like to leave it clicked because I don't feel the need to review what Elena is submitting. So I'll click send request. Okay, Elena has just gotten an email. It'll come from SlideRoom and it says reference request from Julia Brown. Click this link. And then Elena will be prompted to either attach a document that she's written or to type directly into a text box. I can check here and see when we requested it. When Elena fills it out, this will change to completed. If Elena says, oh, I deleted that, can you resend the email? You can click on this resend button. If she comes back to me and says, I have a new email address, actually, I can click edit and it will let me change her information and resend the invitation. So thinking a little bit about how do you invite someone to write you a letter of recommendation? There are ways to do this that are super effective, and there are ways that are less effective. The main thing that I will say is you want somebody who knows your work and knows kind of who you are as a writer. It is far more effective to have a really specific and personal, passionate letter from someone who knows you well but no one has ever heard of versus a more impersonal, cookie cutter, short letter from a very famous person, right? The name does not carry nearly as much weight as the content of the letter for this specific application. I can't speak to applications across the board, but I can tell you what I have seen over, 13 years of doing this. So definitely pick, it can be a collaborator, it can be an agent, a director, an actor you've worked with, someone in a writing group with you, a teacher you've had, a student you've had, a mentor or a mentee, really anybody who you feel like gets you and gets your work and can talk about it in a compelling and specific sort of way. The two things that I will say can be tricky. Here, I have a question here from Sasha. Is the content of the letter going to be visible to us? If you unclick that checkbox that says I waive my right to see the letter, then you'll be able to see it. If you don't, then you won't. But I would say if you want to have, feedback on what the person writes, I would work that out with the person themselves, just so that they know, that you're looking at it. If you're doing a back and forth or something like that, I would work that out with the individual recommender. Um, so somebody who can talk specifically about your work, it can be really helpful to make sure they know what this program is, why you are applying for it, and maybe a little bit about how you described your work in the artist statement. Maybe share your artist statement with your recommender so that they can see what kind of points you're hitting so they can hit the same points and really support what you're saying. Or maybe they don't have time to read all that. Give them a little bullet point list of here's the three main things I like about this program and why I think I'm a good fit. Here are the three main things that I highlighted in my artist statement that I think you have seen in my work. So it'd be great if you could hit on, one or two of those. It can be a conversation with this person. And I think the most effective letters have some kind of conversation as opposed to just like, hey, write me a letter, bye. Like, so that you really can work the letter into the overall story of your application. Pirronne, how do you suggest that people request letters of recommendation or make sure that the letter is effective?
Number one, ask far in advance. I tend to, when I need a letter of recommendation, I want to give that person like at least a month. And when I'm asked to write a letter, I prefer it when I'm given at least a month. It just makes it harder to fit it in the busy schedules of all of our lives if one has less time than that.
Which means
Um,
do it right now, or at
yeah,
least talk to them about it right now.
And definitely, I would say also like make sure you ask before like they get the automated message. Like, because I've also had times where I've gotten the automated message from whatever school program, etc., being like, so and so has requested a letter of recommendation from you, and they didn't actually ask me first. Um, and if I have like a really long history with someone and I've told them I will always write you a letter, it doesn't matter, then like that's not as big of a deal. But I've had situations where it was not as assumed, I would say. Um, and I tend to now ask, like, what would you like me to highlight? What would you like me to hit upon when I'm asked to write a letter of recommendation? And I've gotten more sort of forward about what I when I need a recommendation, what I would like that person to uplift. And so I would say like having a really clear sense of that is helpful because again, people are applying and writing letters of rec and asking for letters of rec all over the place all the time. And so anything that you can do to sort of help focus that person and give them a sense of clarity around what you're looking for out of that letter of rec will also it's just going to strengthen your application because it reduces the chances of them sort of resorting to like platitudes and sort of more generic kind of sentiments about how great you might be. And they might feel that way, but like what will more effectively convey their endorsement is the specificity.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I'll note, just because it happens every couple of years, What I have seen be less effective is a letter from a spouse or a family member, like a parent or sibling. Um, if you feel like you don't have anybody else that you can ask, I would say, maybe if you are a newer playwright, somebody who knows your work in another form, an actor who's acted with you, a classmate from another class. I just think that direct family members and partners are tricky because even if they write the most passionate, specific, and beautiful letter, sometimes evaluators and panelists say, well, of course you'd say that. Like, they don't necessarily feel like it's objective in any way. And that's also often a person who might have a vested interest in you getting this this opportunity because you'll get money and it will come into your household or, things like that. So I'd stay away from that if possible. I will also note what you can see here is that letters of recommendation can be reused for up to 3 years, and that is 3 actual years. So if you applied once in 2018, then we can't reuse that letter. It's actual calendar years, not number of applications that you have submitted. And the first year you use it sort of counts as the first year. So if you applied in January of 2023, 2023, 24, 25, that letter can't be used. But if you applied in 2024 or later, we can reuse your letter. If you don't remember, which a lot of people don't worry about it. Reach out to me. I would love it if you would reach out to me at least 2 weeks before the deadline, which gives me time to check and let you know. And then it also gives you time to find a new letter if you do not have one that can be reused. We can't guarantee that we can reuse every letter, but I will do my best to make that option possible. Please don't email me at 11:45 on January 22nd saying, hey, do I have a letter? I totally didn't even think about it. It just does not set you up for a lot of success, especially in the instance that you don't have one that you can reuse. Great question from Aaron. How long should the rec letter be? We don't have rules about that. It's up to your recommender. I would say if it gets like 3 pages or longer, that can be a little much for an evaluator. I have sometimes seen the comment like, okay, that letter didn't need to be quite so long. But again, if it's something that, your recommender thinks is going to be the most helpful, that you think is going to be the most helpful, it's completely up to sort of you and that person how they want to write it. I would say like 3 sentences might be a little short, might be a little unspecific. Let's see, what is the time commitment to be there? Okay, so if you are selected as a core writer, you are guaranteed one workshop each year for 3 years. That workshop is anywhere between 3 days and a maximum of like 13 days. So 3 days to 2 weeks, depending on if you are doing a general core writer workshop or if you're in the public season. So I would say usually it is a 3 or 4 day commitment one time per year. Awesome. So now that we have our letter of recommendation all set to go, sorry, the one last thing that I will note is I cannot take a letter of recommendation from another program you applied for and add it to your core writer application. We can only reuse previous letters for core writer applications. So if you applied for the Jerome Fellowship last year, I cannot take your Jerome Fellowship recommendation letter and put it on this application. If this is your first time applying for core writer, you need to get a new letter. So just keep that in mind. But now our references is all done because we get the check mark. So we go to the last page, which is the submit page. So this tells you a little bit about what happens. Once you hit the submit button, you cannot access this application any longer. You cannot edit it. However, if you realize that you've made an error, if you submit, tomorrow and then you get a burst of creativity over the New Year's and you write a new draft of the script and you want to submit that, you can reach out to me and I can unsubmit your application, which allows you to make edits, and then you can resubmit it before the deadline. This has to happen before the deadline. Once the deadline has passed, No one can make any changes on your application. And certainly once it is off to the evaluators, I cannot make changes. So if you reach out to me in late February saying, hey, I have a new draft, great, happy for you. It cannot be applied to this application. It's already being evaluated. A little bit of the next steps. So I will screen everything for eligibility. I'll also make sure all of your documents open, that they all appear to be present, that they all are the right page lengths, all of that kind of stuff. If I have questions, I'll reach out to you to figure out any confusion, and then it will be sent to first round evaluators. Again, these are the theater professionals that I described before. Everybody's application is read by at least two different people during this process. After they have finished their evaluations, we will look at the numerical scores and the written comments. And from all of that information, we will put it all together and determine a finalist list of the applicants that have risen to the top throughout that process. Those finalists, those applications will be sent to a final selection panel of 3 theater artists. Those folks will read all of the finalists. They will meet for an extensive conversation. And over the course of that conversation, while they discuss all of the finalists' work, they will determine who the new core writers will be. I do my best to make sure that no one who read your work over the past 5 years will read your work this year. And the selection panel also changes every year. So it should be new eyes if you applied in the past. Sometimes people ask, oh, will they remember the draft that I sent last year? They won't. It's new people. You can just treat it as a fresh, new introduction every single year. Again, as I mentioned, at least one slot is reserved for a Minnesota writer. Playwright Center staff is not involved in the decision-making process. Pirronne and Nicole and I facilitate the process. We will be present for a lot of the process to make sure that it is happening, but we have no opinions. We do not share our thoughts. We do not give feedback on the scripts, anything like that. We just make the container and the space for our panelists and evaluators to give their feedback and make their decisions. So now I'm ready to submit. If I want, I can review my full application and print it off, but I'm going to click the submit button and I get the big green check mark, which means I did it. So I successfully submitted. Hooray. I can print this confirmation page. I can print the whole application if I am a hard copy kind of girl. You will see this note that you will hear either way from us, whether you are selected or you are not selected by the end of June 2026. We do contact everybody who applies. We also know that this takes a lot of time to apply and that some of you may not be current Playwright Center members, and we think that the membership might be useful to you. So we are providing a free trial of a couple of months of membership for you to sign up, try it out, see if you like it. You can do that by contacting Hannah Joyce, who's our Director of Professional Resources and Education, at this email address, and she will help you set up that free trial. But that is all you need to know for how to apply for the application. So I'm going to stop my screen share and open it up if there are any outstanding questions from folks who want to drop something in the chat or unmute. You can also always reach out to me directly outside of this call, and I'm happy to talk you through anything or answer any questions. Sasha, I see your hand.
Hi, Julia and Pirronne. Thank you so much for your time and all this information. It was really, 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 really helpful and comforting as well. My question, I wrote it down, so I'm just going to read it off. I guess I'm curious, like, I'm just thinking about fit, and I'm just wondering, like, in your eyes, like, what makes someone a good fit? Like, what kind of style or content or, like, their goals or what they have to offer, if that's not, like, too abstract?
I think it's a great question. And I probably have a really frustrating answer, which is that we don't have really a specific style or aesthetic or type of content that we work on. I would say a writer who is in a good place for this program is a writer who has specific goals for what they want to develop craft-wise and career-wise, who would be able to come to us and say, hey, Pirronne, this is where I see my work fitting in the field. Can you help me make some connections in that way? Or, hey, can we have a dramaturgical conversation about my work? I'm ready to share my work with collaborators. And I would say somebody who can be sort of self-directed and feels confident in asking for what they might need or what they might want. Somebody who comes in and says, tell me how to develop a play will probably not be as well set up as a person who can come in and say, I really need to work with a composer and I really need to talk to a Dakota scholar on this piece to learn XYZ. This is what I need. Can you provide it for me, or how can we figure out a way for me to get these needs met? We are very process oriented. So even though we do have public seasons that has public readings and streaming involved, we do that because it helps the process. We don't do that because we need to create a product to put out and sell to people, right? All of our tickets are free. So people who come in and say, I want as many eyes on my work as possible. I want the biggest audience possible. My only focus is getting my work seen and produced, and I am not interested in developing the text at all. Probably not a great fit for this program, because what we are good at and the sort of container that we have built for these very, bespoke and variable types of workshops are all focused on the process and on you developing the text, bringing in the collaborators that you need to move the work forward in terms of the text itself. We are not an agency, right? We are not the person who has access to 200 audience members that we can drop in at a moment's notice to make sure that every single person has seen your work, right? We are about the process stage. So I think that, more than any kind of aesthetic question or context question, that need to focus on process in collaboration is the thing that defines if you are a good fit for the core writer program. Pirronne, did I lie? Great.
No, you did not lie. I mean, I think you hit upon this, like the part of this that I think is both beautiful and hard is that like every year the readers change, the panel changes. And it's also just, highly subjective. And, I think and we really try to, sort of communicate to our evaluators like that this is not about whether or not you are particularly like you specifically like love this genre. It's like how well is this person um you know like what is the level of craft you see in this artist in the genre they are writing in. But that being said, all of it's really subjective, and so we've had many core writers who did not get into the program the first time they applied. And so I just want to really underscore how much this is, and this might be really annoying. You might be like, shut up, Pirronne, I already know this, but like that this isn't just like a game of applying, but of reapplying, and that it can be night and day between one year and the next. Uh yeah, I don't know if that's helpful, but
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And even folks who have been core writers in the past, when they apply for a new core writer term, they often also have to apply multiple times. So even folks who have been successful in the past and, know how to write a great application, it is so much about sort of who else is in the pool, who is in the reader pool, what is happening on the Tuesday night that they read your play in their lives and their spirits. It's all these things that we can't control. But reapplying is really common. So if you are not selected your first year, please don't feel however you feel. It's all valid. But please don't decide that means Playwright Center doesn't like me. Playwright Center will never support me. First of all, it's not the staff that makes the decision. Second of all, we do want to support you, and we hope that, you can find that support through the process. I will also say that we offer feedback on every single application. It's up to you if you want to request that feedback. We're not just going to like throw it at you, but if you aren't selected, you will receive an email with that information and with instructions on how to request feedback. And so we hope that even if you're not selected this year, we can provide you some support and advice and things that might help your application, not just for the next core writer application, but anything else you're applying for in the future or anywhere else you're sending this play. So that is something that we take really seriously. We spend a lot of time on it. And we hope that if it's useful to you, you will take advantage of that resource. Any other? Yes, Aaron.
I have a couple questions. Thank you for all this information. It's really great. With the resume,
Mhm.
is there, aside from the playwriting experience, so you have 2 pages of play stuff and then one more page, are you more interested in like if you direct plays, act, or if you're writing scholarship about play? I mean, are you more interested in the writing that we do, even if it's not artistic in ways? Does it matter? A little bit of everything to fill that page?
I think well, the first thing I'll say is you don't have to have 3 pages. It can be 1 page. It's
Okay.
totally, whatever is useful to you. So I wouldn't necessarily like try and pad it to make it to 3 pages if you don't feel like that serves the story that you're telling with your application. And it's completely up to you. So maybe think about, what did you put in your artist statement? Is there something that you're describing about how you do your work that it would be helpful to have if you're like, I approach playwriting from a really academic perspective and all of the research that I've done informs how I do my work? Then maybe it is useful to, talk about that research in your resume so that people can go back and say, oh, wow, they've done really extensive work in that field that they're talking about. Likewise, if we've had writers who maybe they were, medical professionals in an earlier part of their career. They don't want to put their entire medical resume, but if that's what they write plays about, it might be helpful to mention that in the resume to say, oh, this is a person with real professional experience. So I know that when they're writing this work, it comes out of that experience. So I would say it depends, but think about, what is the story or how are you describing yourself and your writing and your career? And how can the resume bolster that?
Okay. Thank you. And the second question is, if you were to become a core writer and you get a commission somewhere else, can you use the core writer program to work on that commission?
Oh, yeah, that happens a
Okay.
lot.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
And we've even done things in the past where, if you have a commission that has some development funds with it, and we can sometimes partner with that theater to sort of supersize your workshop or something, and maybe there are people from that theater who want to come in for the workshop or things like that. We've worked in partnership with other organizations many, many, many times, but we don't have any, because we're not a producing theater, we don't have any like right of first refusal or any, ownership of what you workshop here in terms of, where it gets produced or other institutions that it goes to. The only thing we ask for is that if, there's a play that you developed here and it goes somewhere else, mention that you developed it here.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Awesome. I am going to close us out because this ended up being rather long, but thank you so much for all of the thoughtful questions. They've been really, really helpful. And as always, reach out to us at any time. You've got about a month for this application, so hopefully that gives you time to think about it and work on it. The earlier, the better, as with all of these types of things. But we hope you have a really lovely end of 2025, beginning of 2026. And take care. We can't wait to see your applications.
Go get them. Happy holidays, y'all.